Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing today?
Good morning.
Morning, good morning. Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for a couple more minutes for the rest of the people to join, and then we're gonna go ahead with our lecture for today. Can see in the chat. Sunda said, "Good morning. Really tired." But good thing is, I've seen a lot of your projects, and you guys are doing very good. Starting from the UI to the functionality, they look pretty solid. So for React, we will need to install something, but that I'm gonna show on the go. You don't have to download anything prior. After project, we want party. Well, likely you guys will be getting another gift, which will be a project again. That will be based on React. So if you consider that a party. All right. I mean, so today essentially we are gonna talk about React. We're not gonna go deep into the library. We're just sort of gonna talk about JSX, which is a component or a way of writing React code. So we'll look into that. I think you guys will find that more interesting. Just consider a good deadline for the projects. I mean, you guys try your best to finish up within the deadline, but if we see that there's a proper reason behind not being able to finish, we are pretty flexible about that. We'll take that into consideration. But so far, do you guys have any questions or comments about what we've learned? Yeah, and on that note, based on the number of people we've seen who are a little behind on the lecture videos, how far have you guys caught up? Getting to know that will also be a great help for us. So, likely we are thinking projects. We first want to get our React lectures done, and then probably you guys will have to create your own website using React. Okay, Najla says, I am now on video 40 related to HTML and CSS. Yeah, you're almost there, almost caught up. That's very good. All right. So I can see a lot of people have joined and probably more are joining. So what I can do, let's begin our lecture for today. Let me share my screen. Okay. So Novita says, it's my first day today, trying to catch up with the previous lectures. Yeah, I mean, having knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JSS prior should definitely help. But if ever we do have our lecture videos, we also have added small playlists as resources. You could check those out too. And hopefully it's gonna turn out pretty good. So I believe everyone's able to see my screen over here. And as you can see on the screen, today we're solely going to talk about JSX, at least for this lecture. Now, do any of you know what JSX is? I mean, you can probably get a hint from the name that it's something related to JavaScript. Okay, so JSX is an extension to HTML that helps us sort of design from within the JavaScript file. When working with React, this is something that helps you a lot and makes your life much, much easier. Okay, so what is JSX exactly? Is this a plugin? Not necessarily. It's more like how do you call it? It's an extension for HTML inside the JavaScript file. The React library allows us to use this. So it should be inside the React library. Okay, so yeah, JSX, as you can see, it stands for JavaScript XML. It is an extension for JavaScript often used with React. It also allows you to write HTML-like code within your JavaScript code, hence making it easier to create and manipulate the structure of user interfaces and components in React applications. Pretty straightforward, not a lot of difference. So React is essentially a library that helps us create websites in a more component-based way. We are gonna see what React does or what React essentially looks like in more depth in the next lectures. But this lecture is to set you up for React so that when you're coding, you know what are the best practices and how to do it. Because there's a slight difference between JavaScript and JavaScript XML, which is JSX. They're essentially the same thing, but some parts or some components are written a little different. We'll get into that when we start actually coding it. But now moving forward, let's take a look at what the main differences are, right? So that's something that I feel like a lot of you will think of while we're coding, that we can do the same thing using HTML. Why should we use JavaScript XML or JSX? So as you can see, HTML is more tag based. So HTML, like it uses tags to define elements like maybe the P tag for a paragraph or H1 tag for a header or a heading. Can see in the chat, do you mean JSX is a combination of React and JavaScript? JSX is not really a combination of it. JSX kind of exists within React, if that makes sense. It's a sort of extended version of JavaScript that allows you to use HTML inside it. That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, it like I said, JSX kind of makes your life much easier when you are using React, or even if you're trying to code within just the JavaScript file and don't want to make a lot of changes in the HTML. Like, we'll take a look into that. That's not a problem. But yeah, like I was saying, HTML is more tag-based, so it essentially defines all its elements using tags. Now, HTML has a hierarchical structure. What I mean by that is HTML documents, if you see, they have a structure with a root HTML element containing two sections, head for metadata and body for visible content. Essentially the DOM, right? Now, after that, you can see that HTML is also more attribute based too. It has attributes in it. So HTML elements can have attributes that provide additional information or behavior. For example, when you use an image tag, just the image tag itself won't work. You need to add attributes such as source in order to define where the image is coming from. Also, HTML documents, they're relatively static in nature. They describe the initial structure and the content of the web page, but don't really handle dynamic updates or user interactions. We do that using JavaScript, right? Now, on the other hand, if you look at JSX, which is essentially an extension of the regular JavaScript rather than a separate language. So, I mean, it's primarily used in React and a popular JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Now, if you take a look at this, JSX is more dynamic with its elements. JSX is dynamic and expressive. It allows you to embed JavaScript expressions, variables, and functions within your HTML-like code, enabling dynamic content generation and interaction. So this is something that the traditional HTML file doesn't have. Now, in the next part, you can see that it has custom contents. What do I mean by that? I mean by that, what I mean by that is JSX allows you to create custom components and use them just like HTML elements. This is a very fundamental concept of React, where components can be composed and reused throughout an application. So when I say dynamic, this is kind of what I mean, where you're creating one component and you're essentially using it again and again without having to rewrite it. It's the same as when you're making a program and you create a function and you kind of call that function again and again to complete the task. You don't have to rewrite everything. Kind of the similar concept to that. How do we know when JSX is used on a website? So For that, you could definitely check the developer tools. That's something you could check. And I mean, other than that, when I'm not exactly sure if that's what you're asking. Like when if you want to know that a website that you see is made with JSX or not. So yeah, that's something you could do. You could check out the script if it's available, of course. Yeah, and other than that, you can by seeing a code, you can understand that it's using JSX just by looking at the syntax. I mean, the first catch would be why is there HTML tags inside a JavaScript file? So that's something that's going to give away real quick. So it won't be really difficult to identify which one's a JSX document. All right. So JSX is essentially called JavaScript XML. So what it does is it's an extension for JavaScript. It helps you to write HTML codes inside a JavaScript file. Yes, we will get to an example, definitely. Just getting done with the differences, and right after, we're gonna see examples. Don't worry about that. So yeah, the next difference would be the transpilation. Now, JSX is not directly understood by web browsers. It needs to be transpiled into standard JavaScript code before it can be executed in a browser. Tools like Babel are commonly used for transpilation steps. And one of the most, I would say, useful feature is that components as functions. So in JavaScript, React components are often defined as functions or classes that return JSX. This is in contrast to HTML, where the structure of a web page is defined using static tags and elements. Any questions about the differences between HTML and JSX? Just JS should be good enough. You don't have to use a separate JSX file extension. I believe Marwa has a question. You can go ahead.
Yeah, does JSX basically eliminate the need for a script file when you're coding because everything would be embedded in the HTML file?
Yes and no. So depending on what kind of project you're trying to make, ideally you could make changes from both HTML and the JavaScript file using JSX. Now, like I said, it all depends on how you want to design. So based on that, you could make that choice. So in the chat, I can see. Yeah, I talked about the extension thing. Just JavaScript should be good enough. You don't have to worry about the other stuff. Can both be used at the same time? Yes, you can. You can update the dynamically from the JSX file that you can do. For example, you could create a structure, and based on that, you can, like, by structure, I mean, when we were creating the websites using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, how I showed you guys that I kind of divided into sections and parts. Then I actually start coding inside it. So you could do that and kind of use JSX to update them dynamically, or you could just do all of it inside JSX. That's not a problem either. Difference between JS and JSX. JS, JavaScript only allows you to code basic JavaScript codes. JSX allows you to add HTML codes inside JavaScript. For example, I'm gonna go to a more in-depth example. But for now, let me just annotate and show you guys. So essentially, say this is a function. Let's say, let's call this sum. Let me just call this app. It's easier that way. So I have a function here, and all right. So inside this, I can return h1, say hello, h1. I don't know if that's the right organization. So are we going to use tags from HTML and just without using get element by ID? The thing is, you can do both. We're gonna see both, so don't worry about that. But essentially, this is what JSX, this is how JSX is different from JavaScript itself. You can add this bit and it will still work. We're gonna see examples. Don't worry about that. Nope, not necessarily, but if you want, you can. Like I said, it's all depending on how you want to design it, right? Okay, so yeah, I believe that's the basic theoretical part. Let me just stop sharing and open up VS Code for you guys. So in the chat I see, so okay, it's optional. The thing about it being optional is that you'll see we'll still be using the HTML file to connect, to show you guys how we're reacting with the DOM using the function React DOM. We'll take a look into that. So the thing about it being optional is completely based on how you design it. Okay. So right now, it probably doesn't make as much sense, but in the coming lectures, once we dive deeper into React and we see more examples, you're gonna be much more clear about this. Let me just plug in my charger on my computer. Right. Okay, so let me share my screen. Share my entire window actually. That way you guys can see me shift around in Chrome and this. Okay, so the first thing that we are gonna do is we are gonna create a new folder. So in desktop, I'm gonna create a new folder with today's date, saying November 2nd. Okay, I am gonna open it up. So what I'm gonna do is before I open any file, I'm just gonna use the library to create my React app for me. I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Can you? It should be visible. If there's any issues, do let me know. Okay, so kind of pay attention over here on what I write. So first I'm gonna create my React app using React, and that's gonna automatically install all the libraries for me. I don't have to separately install them. So I'm going to do npx create React app. And let me write today's class. Press enter. As you can see, it's installing all the modules. Just give it a quick second or two. Why not npm? That is a good question. So just give me a second, let me look into it. Okay, so the differences are npm is essentially node package manager, and npx stands for node package execute. Node package manager is in npm. What it does, it package manager for JavaScript and Node.js used to install, share, and manage dependencies in your projects. And npx, it's more like a package runner tool that comes with npm. It's used to execute binary form node modules as well as packages that are globally installed or depend on projects package.json. Does that make sense for you? All right. Okay, so as you can see, it's already installed. So over here, they actually give you suggestions on what to do. So they suggest us to begin by doing a cd today's class and then npm start. So over here, the package manager is starting our program. So what it essentially did, it just opened up this server for me. You guys didn't see it automatically come up, but over here, it just created a local host in my network, and this is what it looks like. I mean, now it has all this going on because the file got generated with these. Let me show you public. So this is what the index.html for it looks like. It has a lot going on. We don't have to worry as much about it. In fact, we can't even get rid of these. NPX didn't work for me. We can look into setup issues during the lab. That's not an issue at all. Just gonna get rid of these to make it cleaner. Okay, so for Zubaida, did you write down the exact thing I wrote, or so? Okay, I'll take a look into it during the lab. Don't worry. So these are JSX or HTML. This is HTML. As you can see, it's index.html. So this is a basic HTML file, but what you need to see is this over here. Do we need to create the today's class file? No, just follow the steps that I did. Just write down, let me write it down in the chat. I think that's gonna be easier for you guys. Just do this. So over here, I wrote today's class. Instead of today's class, you can write whatever you want. Try this. This should work. If not, we can take a look into it during the lab. Okay, so what I need you guys to take a look at is this part, which is the div that holds the ID root. Okay, so this is the important part. And we are gonna kind of work around this div tag only. So let me go into the JavaScript file. Okay, we have a lot going on inside this. We don't need all that. Let me get rid of that. Okay, so we start fresh. One thing that we need to write though is import React from React. This is something that we need to do. Actually, we might not even need this right now, so I'm just gonna let me just take this off. We'll do it when we need it. Okay, so inside this, let me return something. Let's first take a look at what the website is looking like right now. So I just cleared out all the stuff that they had before, and now it's just an empty palette. That's it. So inside this, what I'm gonna do, let me use JSX to return. So remember this, what JSX allows us is to use HTML tags inside JavaScript. So if I write down hello world, should this work? What do you guys think? Let's see. There you go. It came up. We don't really have to make any files. You just follow the 3 lines. You just type in the 3 lines in the terminal, and all the files will generate on its own. You don't have to generate anything over here. Is that clear for you, Samra? Yeah, try that. So right now you can see I entered hello world and it came up over here. So let me try something, okay? Let me use this, and there are a lot of stuff here that we probably don't need. Let's see what it looks like now. Still works. So, so it doesn't need to be inside a parenthesis. Right now, I only have one, so you don't have to put it in a parenthesis. It still works since I'm only returning one tag, but if I go for multiple, you'll see we'll need it. So I see in the chat, Zobeda says, for your class today, it was what? Usually we put JS or HTML. So for today's class, again, just type in these in the terminal after you create the folder, and it should work. Okay, for installation problems, we'll take a look into them during the lab, okay? Don't have to worry about it right now. Kind of just focus on the lecture for now. So yeah, like I said, so this is any Somerset is any file or just folder. You just open a folder. As you can see, what I did, I just opened up November 2 as a folder. I didn't have anything inside it. I just opened that folder and went to terminal, typed those, and here I have everything all set up and ready for me. Okay. All right. So moving forward, as you can see, the JavaScript file now allows me to use HTML tags inside the JavaScript file. No, again, I did not create any of the files over here. They're all automatically created if you put in those 3 commands in your terminal. I did not create any file. I just created this folder called November 2. All right. So, okay. You know what? Let me do it again. Please pay attention. I'll close this folder. Okay. Everyone, please pay attention on what I'm doing. This is a fresh Visual Studio starting page. I just go to File. I open up a new folder. Are you guys with me so far? So let me name this November 2 class. Okay, I just created the folder, nothing else. Is it clear for everyone so far? So now I go to terminal. As you can see, I open up a new terminal. I don't have to do anything else. I open up a terminal. Inside the terminal, I type in npx create React app, and let's call this class today. Let's change the name a little. Then I press enter. It starts creating all the libraries for me. Are you guys with me so far? All right. This is very simple. Please try to follow what I do. It's gonna be easier for you guys. So now we're gonna give it a second to install and wait for a little. Okay. Have you used npm or have you used npx? Okay, for errors, I'll take a look into it, but otherwise, please just try to follow what I'm doing. Okay, I'll take a look into the errors during the lab, all right? So beta says, no, it's absolutely fine. Like, installation errors happen, so you don't have to worry about it now. Just make sure you understand the steps I'm doing. So even after that, over here, you see it's giving us suggested steps too. So I do cd class today. It essentially takes us into the folder. And what npm start will do is npm start will start our local host for us. As you can see, it just came up. Okay, so now you see it is create app.jss because you wrote React app, so we can replace it with React name. No, I would just keep that as it is. Keep create React app, and you can change the today's class or class today name to whatever you like. So essentially like this. Um, anything. You need a space between that though. Let me just delete that and send a new one. Command V. anything. Okay, so now let's get back to it. As you can see, I have a folder created for me over here that will contain all my files. Now, one thing, the index.html file should always be in the public folder. So I go into that. Samina, do you have a question?
Yes, I just had a comment because when you wrote the instruction, you wrote anything, but you wrote CD my React app. It's not my React app. It's that anything, that the folder, anything that
Uh,
was.
yes. Let me just correct that. So it's gonna be anything. Change this. Usually after the first line, they're gonna give you oh God, no, just sent it. So, okay, usually after the first instruction, it's gonna give you suggestions on what to type in next. You could follow that as well, but I'm also writing it down in the chat. Okay. No, why is the enter not working over here? Yeah, there you go. Samina wrote it down. You don't have to worry about anything. Just follow the steps I'm doing right now. Just follow those. You should be good. The rest we're gonna learn later. Okay? So for now, please just let's just try to follow the lecture as we're going forward. The errors we're gonna look into it during the lab, don't worry. And for any concept that you guys think you're confused that why it's there, we're gonna talk about it later. Maybe in this lecture, if I have time, or maybe in the next lecture, because this is a continuous lecture for these. Okay, back to the code. So I'm gonna get rid of all the unnecessary stuff that are already here. I don't need the comments right now. Just creates more confusion and takes up more space. Okay. So everything's taken care of in the HTML file, but the one thing that I want you guys to notice is I have a div open over here called, or it's open with the ID root. So keep this in mind that this tag exists. Now let's go into our app.js, our main.js file over here. So inside this, I'm gonna get rid of all this. I don't need this right now. So let me write down HTML code over here saying hello. Let's see how this works. It came up onto the browser. Is it clear for you guys so far? All right. So, sorry about that. One thing that you guys should notice is how this is actually different from what we've done so far. So far, all we did was call the ID and make changes in the HTML file, right? This H1 element is JSX. Yes, this is. This is what JSX allows us to do. So this syntax that you're seeing, this is a JSX syntax. All right, so yeah, like I was saying, so it's different in a way because we are able to write down the HTML codes inside the JavaScript file. So that's a very big plus. Now let's try to play around with it, okay? Let me go to app.css. I don't need all this. Let me get rid of it. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a class over here and let's call it head. And inside this, just so that you guys don't confuse it with the tag. So inside head app, what I'm gonna do, let me add, say, padding or margin to this. I don't know, padding should work better. Let me add padding of 100 pixel, okay? And right now, as you can see, it has nothing because this CSS class is not linked with anything. So let's do this. Let's write down class and equal to, over here, let's write down head, and what did I name the thing? Head app. This should work. As you can see, it added 100 pixel padding to the whole thing. So we need to use this JSX with app.jss and not CSS. You don't use JSX inside CSS. CSS is completely a styling sheet. What we do is, as you can see over here, I imported the CSS sheet over here in the JavaScript file. Because of that, I'm able to connect the two and just change any tag I want using classes. It's the same concept. Remember how in HTML we used to name it class and then like that dot something, whatever you name that class, you can add CSS to it. It's the same concept over here. Are you still confused about it, Nachla? All right. But yeah, in simple terms, we're doing the same thing that we used to do in the HTML file, but we are using JSX from the JavaScript file to do that. All right, hope that's clear for you guys. So over here, I added this, and if I want, I can change the writing inside the h1 tag using a variable as well. This is something that we were not able to do inside a HTML file. So right now, let me write down, say, constant. I don't know what to name this. Let's say name. So constant name, and let's call this hello CIC. So what we can do is, oh, I think it did something over here that's creating the error. Oh, okay. I think I understand what's going on. This is another learning step for you guys. No, it's not really just the semicolon. There's something else going on over here, which you guys will see very soon. Okay, let me just name this welcome CIC, put in the semicolon. But as you can see, it's still showing red. No, I did not make anything myself. I just followed those 3 steps and everything was created over here. So remember, after I was done, it looked kind of like this, right? So why are there HTML files? As you can see, this one, it's only creating the root. I haven't really used it yet. You're gonna see in the lecture, in this lecture, how we're gonna use this ID to make changes. All right. So we haven't really used anything yet. So kind of hold on to that thought. We're gonna see that very soon. But for now, focus on what we are doing. Let's not panic about what's not there. So, okay, as you can see, it's throwing an error. It's not working. Why? because inside any, wait, just give me a second. Let me see if I can give you guys a definition for this. Why use constant name? Yes, we are gonna see why. Just give me a second, okay? Um, okay. So the idea behind it is that JSX only allows one root element. Now, before we do that, let's try this, okay? I feel like this might be easier for you. Let's get rid of the CSS as well. Let's keep it plain and simple. So let's do another H1 or maybe a P tag. All right. So this is what I was saying. So let me just write down, hello, welcome to class. Okay. So as you can see, over here, we have two different tags. That's why it's giving us an error saying it cannot parse the document. So the thing about JSX is it can only have one root element. As you can see here, we have two elements, right? We can only have one root element. So that's something that we have to consider. Now, what we can do is we can wrap this around a div. Exactly. Now, there's one thing that you guys can do. Say you have a very big code. Okay, so for the results, we see everything over here on the server. Like I said, we are using the JavaScript file, but we are coding HTML inside it. That's what JSX allows us to do. So since there is an error, nothing's showing over here, it's just showing us the error. That's the advantage of using that library that I just installed, okay? Okay, so if you follow the steps that I did in the class in the very beginning, just those 3 lines where we are essentially using npx create react app, that automatically creates the server for you. When you write down npm start, you're essentially starting the server that is built in within the library. Does that make sense? Exactly. When you put in npm start, npm is starting the server. What do I mean by root element? Okay. So let's see in text.html. Over here, actually, we can do it over here too. Why go back? So over here, you can see, let me write it down like this, all right? Div. Nope. Okay, so I think just putting these inside a container will help. All right, so by root element, I mean is the root tag, the parent tag for everything. Is there a parent tag over here? No, these are all separate tags themselves. What I mean by that is I need to wrap these around with another tag. So likely that could be a div. So one good tool that you guys could use is, since all this could be a lot when you're coding, you can just go to View, you can go to Command Palette, you can just write down wrap with abbreviation, and just write down the name of the tag you wanna place around it, and it just does it for you. So right now I didn't press enter, that's why I didn't go through. Let me do that. Div. There you go. It's wrapped around a div tag. Now the error is gone. So that's what I'm saying. Over here, the parent tag is the div, and the h1 and p tag are the children. So div over here is our root tag. Can we call whole HTML a root? Yes, in that document, that is the root file. But over here, in this particular case, the root is div because there's no other tag wrapping these tags over here. So the parent tag essentially over here is div. Does that make sense for everyone? Anyone, any questions about this part? Why we wrap this around a div? Okay, that's good. So now we can see it should show on our website saying, it's still giving us a warning. Oh, there you go. Something wrong with the server. Regardless, let's forget about that. And yeah, here you go. All right. So as you can see, it came up on our website over here. Can you have two function app? You can, but that will be a little more complex. You can have nested functions, definitely. That's the whole point of having it inside a JavaScript file so that we can use it by creating functions. Okay, so for Samra, when you press npm, if you remember the terminal commands that I wrote down, over there you will see something like this, right? When you write this in the terminal, your website automatically gets created on the server. And right now it's automatically doing changes, and I can see it on the website over here. If you did, yeah, it opens automatically. If that did not work for you, there's probably a setup issue, which I can definitely help you out during the lab time, all right? But for now, try to focus on what I'm doing in class. Okay, so that's that. I have hello, welcome to class. But like I said, what if I wanna add my name to it? So I'm just gonna write down constant, then maybe name, and then I'm gonna write down, say, CIC. There's something wrong about this. No, it shouldn't be outside. Just trying to see what's wrong. Yeah, this is odd. It's not allowing me to do this for some reason. Hmm. It's interesting. Command X. Let me do it over here. Oh, there you go. Okay, so I already have a variable that's called name. What I will do, if I do this, it should come up over here. So let me change this to CIC. There you go. Hello, CIC. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that's what was wrong. I could even do this over here too. Was just doing it in the wrong block. Should work the same here too. So what you can do, you could make this a global variable and write it outside the function, or you could write it inside the function as well. If you guys remember during JavaScript, we showed you guys how to write global variables and local variables. It's kind of the same concept. So over here, this works as well. You could just use a variable to write down, or you could use a variable inside a HTML tag, which we never could do before. Are you guys with me so far? So the variable inside the function will be accessible by the function. Okay. So far, what have we learned? We've learned essentially how to generate all these files automatically without doing a single thing, just by writing one command in the terminal. Everything gets created. We saw that. We saw how to start our local host over here in the browser. We saw that just by doing npm start. And afterwards, we've seen the syntax of JSX, which is you can write down HTML codes inside a function just by using the tag itself. Another thing that we've learned is when we are using multiple tags, we don't really know which one's the root tag or the parent tag. Those are individual tags themselves. That's why we need to wrap them around with another tag to make that the root and the rest the children. Afterwards, we saw how we can use a variable to display whatever we want through the HTML tag. So let's actually do that. Let's inspect. So over here, yeah, since we're doing the whole thing from HTML tag, we are in the body. Yeah, because this is what you were looking for. Yeah, over here, if you see, it does come up inside the HTML, even though we did not write it in the HTML file. As you can see, our HTML file has nothing.
But always the theme it's creating inside the body. So I
Mhm.
can play with the header or with the footer, just inside the body. Can it be?
You can. We'll see it in the next part of the lecture where we are using IDs to kind of manipulate whatever we want to do throughout the document. But as you can see, just using JSX, we're actually creating the HTML tags itself within the file.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions about these? So in JSX, we don't need to add the $sign. If it was just JavaScript, then likely we would have to. Yeah, of course I can show the CSS file. My CSS file is over here, app CSS. It's not doing anything because I didn't add this, I didn't add this title or add this class to any of the tags over here. So it's essentially just gonna be the same. So the CSS file essentially right now it's null. It has nothing. It has no use because I didn't add any CSS to it yet. HTML file is over here. It has nothing. All these I can just get rid of. We don't even need these. Yeah, I got rid of these and still it's gonna work the same. It just added all the extra stuff because when I just automatically generated it, it brought up a design for React itself. Yes, so JSX is an extension to JavaScript so that we can do HTML codes inside the JavaScript file. Are you going to use React from now on? Yes. So from here on, our React lectures start. We're gonna dive deeper. Don't worry about it. Everything is gonna be much more clear. So if you guys don't have any questions about this so far, let's take a 10-minute break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna take a look into yeah, exactly, that's what I was saying. So let's take a 10-minute break and we're gonna come back and we're gonna see some more implementations of JSX. Are there any limitations? Yeah, we're gonna talk about those too. Like the limitations, honestly, um, it's essentially what it does, it only enables you to use the HTML codes inside the JavaScript file. But that's about it when it comes to limitations. All right, so yeah, we can go on a 10-minute break. So we'll come back and take a look at some more stuff. So it's created inside div root. If we don't have it, we'll also create inside body. Yes, it will create inside body. All right, okay, so why don't we all go on our 10-minute break and come back and take a look at the rest. Samra says, can I share my screen? You help me why I can't see my local server. So is it okay if I take a look at it during the lab? I mean, I can open up breakout rooms now. Just help you out there. Yeah, because I can't really move from this, then the recording will stop. We don't want that. All right, everyone. So we are back. Okay. So let me share my screen again. Okay. If you guys have any issues seeing my screen, do let me know. All right, so let's move on to the next part. So we know how the DOM works, right? What JSX does, JSX doesn't really change the DOM itself. It changes the virtual DOM, which in turn checks if the DOM is the same or not, and then it changes what's inside the DOM. So let's take this for example. I'm just trying to rough up an example over here so that you guys can understand better. All right, so here you go. Let's take these two as examples, all right? So right here I have the H1, and right here I have the P tag. Same goes here. H1 and P. So this right here, this is the virtual DOM. So what happens is JSX makes changes over here. Let me take this, change it to yellow. So when I change something, what JSX does, JSX makes a change in the virtual DOM, and afterwards JavaScript kind of checks with the DOM itself and makes the changes in the actual DOM. So in order to access the virtual DOM, we use this function called React DOM. Now, in order to install that, what we do is, let me show you guys. So we will be required to install. Let me see if it's already installed or not. So I'm just gonna install the React DOM npm install React and React DOM. Press enter. Yeah, it's up to date, which means it's already installed. I don't have to worry about that right now. So all I need to do right now is just import it over here, saying import, and I will write down React DOM from React DOM. So I just write this down to make sure whenever I use it later on, our document finds React DOM. It doesn't think it's undefined. Before I go into that, there's one thing that I want to ask you guys. So when I added the div over here, did the DOM add an additional element to it, or did it not make a difference?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. So my question is, when I added the div over here, did it add a new element to the DOM, or did it not make a change? Did it not make a difference? Added a new element, you're correct. So DOM's like a tree, right? So inside div, we have h1 and p tag. So it did add a new element to the DOM. But what if we don't want to add a new element to the DOM and we just want to keep it the way it is, but still be able to display these over here, the h1 tag and the p tag? So what JSX does, JSX allows us to do that using something called fragments. So in order to use fragments, we have to import them first. Import, then don't forget the curly braces, fragment, and when I press enter, it automatically just takes it in. So what I can do, I can just change this into fragment. So here's another short trick that you guys can use. For Mac, I use Command D. When you use Command D, it just essentially selects the same name wherever it's repeated. So right now the cursor is at div. If I press Command D again, it creates two cursors. So essentially you can change the same name in multiple places. And for Windows, I think it's Control D, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so right now I'm just gonna change this to fragment. And as you can see, it still works, but our DOM has one less element. As you can see over here, it does not have that div over here, but it's still displaying the h1 tag and the p tag. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Anyone? Any questions? So fragment, essentially, you can take it as JSX's way to help us section our code. Now, why don't need another section? We don't, well, okay. I'll repeat what fragment is again, okay? Just change this. Okay, let's take a look at the DOM now. Inside the root over here, you can see another div is created. But this just adds another element to the DOM, right? But is it necessary? Do we need another div tag? If this was just HTML, we wouldn't need to do that, would we? What do you guys think? Anyone with answers? Yeah, so we didn't need another div. If this was HTML, we could have just written h1 and p. Now, since JSX has a sort of limitation, you can say, that we cannot just write two tags over here without a parent. So if you see, if I don't have the div tags, it gives us an error, correct? Because it's just two tags, it does not have a parent. So all JSX blocks need to have a parent of its own. So for that, I use the div tag to wrap it around and create a parent for it. But like I said, it's creating an extra div, which I don't want. Now, since JSX has that restriction, in order to do what we want and not create an additional element to the DOM, we use fragment. JSX has given us the tool called fragment. What fragment does, it essentially just wraps the tags around with a fragment, sectioning it out, so we can use div or fragment as parent. Yes, you can. Ideally, I would say use fragment when an extra div is not needed. That way your code stays clean without any extra tags laying around. So as you can see, I used fragment over here, but for fragment, how gonna know where we should located the elements inside? I'm not trying to understand. Let me read it again. So the thing is, like, when you see a broader example, you'd probably get the idea of multiple fragments. But for now, let's just focus on the main functionality. Usually you see that this one section doesn't really need more than one parent. So that's why we just use one fragment for one section. That makes sense. And when you're using React, most of it's gonna be like function based or class based. That's why you're not likely gonna have to do a lot of multiple fragments. You can use it as many times, I think. That shouldn't be a problem. Let's see. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Inside a fragment, if you have multiple fragments, that should be an issue. But what if I did that inside this? It would work as a nested fragment. So the whole idea of using fragments is just to add a parent tag without having another separate tag lying around, if that makes sense. So fragment doesn't really add on to the DOM. As you can see, in this div tag, we don't have that extra div right now. So fragment essentially just helps us take out extra tags like that. It just helps us wrap this around with a tag that essentially doesn't come up to the DOM itself. Does that make sense? Is everyone clear on that? Okay, so now another shortcut for this is you don't even have to write fragment like this. Just writing it like this should be good enough. It should create a fragment. Should work the same without the div tag, but it has the fragment over here. So we can have a div along with a fragment, depending on how you're designing. Like I said, like the fragment over here is essentially taking out the additional tags that we need in order to make this supportive with JSX, if that makes sense for you. Does that answer your question? All right. So, okay. There is another thing that I need to show you guys, which is React DOM. Correct. So we did all this right now, but as you can see, if I take these, if I create another div over here inside the HTML tag, for example, let me write down div. No, that's not how I do it. Div, okay. And let me just write an ID second. Okay. Now if you go back to the DOM, you see that it did not update. Wow, okay. Um, Curious. Okay, let's forget about this. Just take the root, for example. So I don't know why it didn't show, but it usually works as a nested. Okay, let's try it now. Should be inside. All right, let's forget about it for a bit. I received an error that says fragment is not defined. Oh yes, so you would need to import this line over here. You have to write down this line at the very top. Try typing this at the very beginning. It's showing fragment is not defined, likely because it hasn't been imported yet. So what you can do, you can type this on the top and it should work. If it still doesn't work, then likely fragment has not been installed yet, but we can install that separately. Do let me know if that works or not. So Salma has a question. So what was React DOM used for here? So we're dynamically doing everything from the JavaScript file. Essentially, that's what we're trying to show over here. React, we didn't really use it over here properly. We're just trying to understand JSX. All right, so what if I want to do the whole thing using IDs? So let me just cut this. So if I want to do the whole thing using IDs, let's see how we do that. Now, inside this, let's write down a constant. We always remember when it comes to getting elements from ID, we always need a constant. So in this case, let's use this where we're using constant root. We're just gonna get the root element over here. And in order to, so the thing is we could just get the ID just by using document.getElementById, by ID, but our DOM would not understand which one's the root. So we're just getting the ID over there. We have to let the DOM know which one's the root. For that, we use React DOM. I don't think it's typing. It's because my cursor's in a different screen. Okay. So React DOM dot create root dot create root, and inside this I'm gonna write document dot the same thing, get element by ID, and inside this I'm gonna write down the name of the tag. Again, I did the same mistake where I'm writing it down inside the return block. I have to do it outside it. So now it should work. Now, inside this, what I could do, let's forget about return, okay? Let's try to do it in another way. Let's create a variable over here that says element. This variable right here is gonna hold all our elements for us. Now, inside this, if I do the same thing where I essentially create the h1 tag and a p tag as well. Now, you guys tell me, what should I do to get rid of this? The red wavy lines, the error essentially. What should I do? What do I need to do? Anyone? Fragments, you are correct. So what I am gonna do is, so let's just use view, command palette, wrap abbreviation around. I'm just gonna write down fragment. Okay, forgot to press enter. So fragment, there you go. So it works now. We're gonna do it in a different way. We can use return, but we can also do it in a different way. That's the one I'm showing right now. Okay, so right now, after I do this, nothing should come up on the website. Yeah, it's an empty website now. But in order for it to be shown, what I have to do, I have to render it into the website. So remember, I selected the root over here. I use that root dot render. And over here, I'm gonna render the variable element because it holds all our elements over here. Now it's not gonna show anything anyways because I didn't write anything. So let me just write down name again. Don't forget to close the curly braces. That's right. Welcome to class. Let's see the website now. See, now it appears. So the reason behind it not coming up is it wasn't rendering. When we return it, it just returns the value. But since this function wasn't returning anything, it wasn't showing on the website. But once I use root.render, it does come up in the website. Now, again, the questions do arise. Why should I use this? Or when should I use return? All those questions, yes, so we use render. So all those questions will be answered when we are doing bigger projects. And these are simply the tools that you can use. These are not the projects itself. So make sure you guys understand the tools itself so that when we are using these in the project, you guys can understand better for you, like why we are using these and where we are using these. This means replace the elements inside the tag. It doesn't really replace. What render essentially does is it kind of returns these to the root. Yes, create. Yeah, it just creates these in the root. You could say that. That's one way of putting it. Any questions, guys? So if you see in my index.html, I have a div with the ID root. I'm just calling that over here. Yeah, so essentially what render is doing is, since it's not returning anything from the function itself, we are using root.render to create these elements inside the root. Like I said, it creates it in the virtual DOM first, and then it's updated in the actual DOM. Okay. Sort of, yes. You're correct. Kind of like that. Is it clear for you guys so far? Any questions? Do you guys understand the basic concepts? Yeah, for sure. I don't need this. I don't know why it's here. Um, Vanilla JS is just JS, JS itself. So what we are using right now is React JS. So what return did before is just return all that what we did over here as a value to the as a value into the website. But since we're not returning anything right now, nothing is being created. So for this and for using, when you're trying to render something into the website by ID, this is how you do it. And if you're just doing it without the ID, you can just return the whole value, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But let's try to make something a little more dynamic, because this is still static. We're making a dynamic website, but it doesn't look dynamic. So let's change this, okay? Let me create a h2 tag here. And let's try to write down our time. h2. So how do we do that? So I'm just gonna write it is, and before this is export default app. Yeah, that's essentially what it's doing. It's just calling the app function. Because over here we're declaring the app, and over here we're calling the app. When it comes to JSX, as you can see, we're kind of using import and export for calling these functions or libraries. After that, use these. Okay, so it says, okay, let me just see. I hope that answers your questions, Navita. Wakas is asking, here's the fix for people who haven't been able to. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you for that, Wakas. So Sama is asking, how are the two files related together in index.html and app.js? So it's in the same directory, if you can see. So it's going by the directory. That's why we don't really have to link it separately. It's just taking it as the root. That's it. What is the benefit of using JSX? So the benefit of using JSX, as you can see, all this that we did, adding a variable to a HTML tag, we never did that before. Moreover, we never could code HTML inside JavaScript. So that's also an addition. When using React, this will be very helpful because this will make our code much more clean. All right, so let me go back to what I was doing. I was gonna add a timestamp over here. So let me use the function new date again. The function that I'm using, it's a built-in function over here in JavaScript. You could use that anywhere. New date dot to local time string. This, let's see if it worked. There you go. It's showing us our time right now. Well, I am in Toronto, that's why it's showing this time. It's probably showing will probably show a different time for you over there in BC. So, but as you can see, it's stuck. It's kind of stuck. It's not going dynamically. For that, what we can do is we can set an interval over here. And it's gonna keep on running this function again and again after 1 second. Samra, do you have a question?
Yeah. So basically, I was trying to find something on ChatGPT. So, for example, the games we were doing last 2 weeks back. So, the ChatGPT gave me the code in which there were HTML elements in it as well. So, can we not use HTML element tags within the .js file without React, or can we?
No, React, JSX is a part of React, so you will need React to do this.
So you are saying we cannot use HTML codes in .js without JXML.
No, you
Oh,
can't. You need JSX in order to do that.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right, so as you can see, I just set an interval where it will keep on running this app every 1 second, and it kind of makes it dynamic like that. So it's just changing it every second so that we can see the time in a more dynamic manner. Is that clear so far for everyone? So far, so good? Anyone with questions or comments? So over here, they always count seconds as milliseconds. I think you can write down 1s as well. Let's try that. No, I don't think it works like that. So this function, it counts everything in milliseconds. So that's why you're just kind of using milliseconds to represent seconds. If you wanted 3 seconds, you would write 3000 over here. All right. So right now, what we did, we just saw some ways to go about the same thing. When and why we need it, we will see soon in the next lectures. Do we have to define const root equals to on every function? Yes, because this variable is only available inside this function. Now, if you have a common root, you could just declare it outside as well. It should work the same. You could do this here too. It should work. Let's see. Oh no, it does not. Okay, makes sense. That's because the main app function is right over here. So you kind of declare the root inside the app function. Does that make sense for you? All right, that's perfect. Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, let's go on a 10-minute break and we will come back and talk about the lab. All right, I'll stop sharing and see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, we are back for our lab. So I have added a documentation and a video to a YouTube link. Link to a YouTube video. Sorry, my bad. So yeah, I have added a documentation and a link to a YouTube video that you guys could watch. I think that YouTube video is very descriptive, so it could be useful for you guys. Now notice his setup and my setup is different. Don't worry about that. Either works. If you feel like that setup is easier for you, you could use that as well, whichever you find easier. But yeah, you guys can take a look into that. And during the next lab, the quiz is going to be open, which is essentially going to be the class and the documents, mostly the class. I would say mostly what we did in class, that's going to be in the quiz. But the documentation and the video are so that you guys can understand better what have been done in the class. But the main questions for the quiz are going to be from the lectures. All right. Yeah, so let's do that. And I believe I have opened breakout rooms already. So if you guys want to discuss with your group mates about your project, you can do that as well. Otherwise, if you have questions, do raise your hands. Yes, so I can take you guys to breakout rooms. That's not a problem. I believe Samra was asking for help from during the class. Let me just take her to a breakout room first. All right, let me see. I have a few questions about the game presentation. Suppose we submit our project today. And what is it? During that time. Okay, so the presentation date, we're not really sure yet when we're gonna take the presentation. We haven't discussed about like a final date because a lot of people are still working on theirs. The presentation is gonna be about 10 minutes, and this is up to you. The main idea is you're gonna describe your project to us the best way you can. Now, you could do that using slides. You could do that with a live demo. Likely, we will check for a live demo, but if you want, you can add slides as well. That's up to you. But yeah, the description, the presentation is going to be around 10 minutes long. Hope that answers your question. All right, so right now what I will do, we'll go into breakout rooms.